Okay, while I'm here, I thought I'd do a quick follow on to my last video where I touched upon right relationship. My last video where I was talking about dodgy gurus. And I talked about right relationship, and I think I'd just like to talk a little bit more about that. Hopefully a lot shorter than my last video was. So for me then, right relationship is... What is a relationship with another? Well, it's got to be a really supportive environment, and for me, it's got to be about depth too. You've got to be, known to each other, really known to each other. So surface relationships, to my way of thinking, are no good. And there's an idea within the spiritual community, sometimes within, some gurus, and they talk about the idea of polygamy as being something to, it's almost presented as though something to aspire to. And I think it goes hand in hand with the idea of a spiritual transpersonal experience. So if you, when you start meditating, and I'll talk a little bit about problems encountered during meditation as well, I think, in another video. But when you start meditating and you might start to find, the boundaries that make you, the I that encompasses this person here, start to dissolve. You, where do I begin? And the rest of the room, or, ends. Where is this delineation? We think we absolutely know when on a day-to-day level we're just in these bodies. But meditative practices, although sometimes sold as health enhancing and whatnot, ultimately the idea is awareness, and it's bringing you back to very core spiritual truths which do go beyond the personal in the sense that we think of it. So there's this sense with gurus who say, yes, don't need to be in a relationship with just one other person. It can be polygamous, etc. It's absolutely fine according to them. The idea behind it being that because they've gone into a sort of transpersonal territory and very spiritual territory, so their perspective has shifted. It's gone a bit higher, I suppose, and that can be something that can happen as well when you meditate. You can find that you zoom out a little bit. So instead of being quite so enmeshed in petty day-to-day concerns, sitting in traffic and worrying about how long it's going to take you to get to work, and fabricating a conversation in your mind with how you're going to break it to your boss that you're late, or God knows what else. The mind can cling on to so many different things. Some we're consciously aware of, others not quite so much. And meditation can just pull you back. So it can become a choice. Do I really want to get enmeshed in that way of thinking? Do I just not want to go there? You have much more control, I suppose. So polygamy then can be sold as as something to aspire to. And I would just, again, exercise discernment and caution. Just because a guru that you like talks about these things doesn't necessarily make it right. Not at all. I think I'm going to try and make this quick. We'll see how I go. There's so much unhealed angst, difficulty, worry, concern, problems within the whole contexts of the idea of relationships. Anyway, the idea of relationship encompasses so much, and is so problematized and has been so distorted in so many ways by current media representation. So you've got things like the casual hookup, you've got sexuality as being so dominant, you know, there are all sorts of areas where we're told we need to focus on this. This is important, where it might not actually need to have or shouldn't have that much concern or preoccupation, let's just say. And for me, I just think relationships, it doesn't matter your orientation, homosexual, heterosexual, but I think one other person. For a start, to my way of thinking, one other person is quite enough. You know, when you've gone to work, you come home from work, etc. There are all sorts of potential gaps in our sort of day-to-day lives where intimacy and just knowing this other person, being with this other person, listening to them, paying attention to them, there's all sorts of potentials for moments to just slip through the net where we can have these moments of connection and we lose them. And very often, especially with people with kids, and then suddenly the kids become the preoccupation, and so often, you know, 20, 30 years go by and people find that they've fallen out of love, or, you know, something's been lost. And I think it's important, if you're with someone and you really care about them, it's important to find ways to keep that connection. And it isn't necessarily about sex, although a lot of people want to make it about sex. It's about intimacy. It's about knowing each other, being connected to each other, and being of service to each other, because we're all interconnected. And relationships are about compatibility and they're about care. You know, it's a mutual caregiving role where you want to care and look after for the other. You know, it isn't all about you. Again, for some people it is. Some people can have quite shallow notions of what constitutes a relationship. And society, again, with the idea of sites like Tinder, is again pushing the idea of the casual hookup. And a lot of people are only too keen to go there. But to my way of thinking, casual hookups are a waste of time. Seriously. If you're bored, go out with your friends. Absolutely, there's this sense of sex being, you know, it's like going into a sweet shop, picking up something and then taking it home. There's that level of casual detachment sometimes that some people can have regarding sex. And sex is an incredibly intimate activity. It shouldn't be taken lightly. You know, I think in the old days it used to be more that guys would use quite quite rough language or whatever when it came to talking about sex, and they'd absolutely depersonalise the experience and make it sound, you know, like they could be walking into a shop, coming up with something, and that's it. You know, literally that divorced from an emotional experience. And of recent times, it's perhaps become more of a trend for a lot of women to start doing the same. And I don't know, to my mind, when I hear people talking about it like that, I feel sad, because it's a connection, it's a real connection, and they've just lost that chance at having that connection completely. They've just made it about something else. They've just made it about simple gratification, simply about getting their needs met. And I think a lot is lost when you reduce something to that level. So I think there's so many problems already. We don't need to further problematise an already difficult subject for us to deal with. In spirituality too, we have problems. There's tantric sex, isn't there? And that's touted about, you can go on tantric retreats for goodness sake and things like this. And I think, well, what's the point? And again, the idea there is sometimes that goes hand in hand with polygamy. The idea that you can have this incredibly emotional, intimate then experience, because that's what it's supposed to be, according to, I should say, Western New Age teaching. I should add that in, because that isn't what Tantra was initially designed for. It wasn't designed to have the emphasis on sex at all, I don't think. At all. I think that's literally what we've done to it in the Western world. So you get people going to these retreats with this idea there's polygamy, and then polygamy, but you can have these intimate connections with all sorts of other people, and it really doesn't matter, because the idea of having some sort of one man, one woman, or one man, or whatever connection, the idea of that is seen as archaic and to do with, say, Christianity and other religions, which are seen as being like dinosaurs, and therefore it doesn't matter. To my way of thinking, it does matter. And I think we need to fix collectively so many problems that we've got floating around about sexuality, and about relationships and about what they mean, before we even think about polygamy. I read a wonderful description that somebody wrote on a message board on social media a little while ago about tantric sex or whatever, and she said so much of it seemed, what word did she use? Tentacular or something like that. The idea of people thrashing about trying to find something to fulfil their needs. And I think I see it as being like that. I think it's about another form of distraction, isn't it? So much of spirituality should be just about being present with a moment and allowing spirit to come in. But when people have these obsessions with, well, I say obsession, the idea of just needing to grab onto this or that or the next distraction, that's not spiritual. It's not spiritual. It's just another distraction, You might as well have your mobile phone and just be on that for a weekend, because you're trying to attain something, and you're trying to grasp at something. And the whole idea behind spirituality, I suppose, or certainly meditation, is letting go. Just sitting with what is. Letting go. Not grasping. You might have had a lovely spiritual experience. Don't grasp at it. Don't try to grasp at it. You'll want to, because you go, that was great. I want another one of those. But that's not what it's about. And you can't replicate. You can't pick and choose. You can't go, have another experience like that, please. When you sit down and meditate, you don't know what you'll meet from in here. And you don't know what your experience will be. So it's about meeting what is and not running. And it's certainly not about just trying to stuff the senses full of everything that you can necessarily, because that's just another form of distraction as well. So yeah, in a nutshell, I think we can do this in about 15 minutes, which is great, because normally I rattle on for ages, which I do apologise for. But yeah, basically then, before we even begin to think in terms of polygamy and let's fix the things that are wrong with relationships. Let's work on them. Let's look at all the distortions, all the unhealed stuff, the projection, the reduction, the fetishization, the over-sexualization. Let's fix all that. And we can't go out there and fix it all externally, but we can fix it within ourselves by just starting to view things in healthier ways and recognizing patterns and recognizing behaviors and just turning towards something a little bit better if we can, And I'm not talking about turning into, I don't know, some sort of saint. I'm just talking about awareness, coming back to what's right as opposed to what society tells us what's right, thinking about our own behaviours, congruency within ourselves, striving towards doing the right thing, viewing people as people, not a set of boobs or whatever if you're a guy, you know. Porn is a hell of an industry, and I think that's probably answerable for a lot of society's ills these days. I don't think it's healthy. So I think there's an awful lot there. So when people talk about polygamy and things like that, I think generally, no. Just no. Just let's think about the way we're doing things and the reasons that we have and what we want out of it, you know, especially if it's all about you. I remember one of my Facebook friends a little while ago posted something on their page about how they wanted somebody to understand them completely and all of this, and it sounded very one-sided. And I thought, you're going to understand them so completely as well, you know? It's got to be the give and the take, and it isn't all about you when you go into a relationship. So 16 minutes. So I think that says it all in a nutshell. I hope so. I have rattled on a bit, but I hope I've not rattled on too much. And I'll leave it on that note for the time being. I might come back to this subject again at a later date, but I'll leave it there for the time being. So thank you and take care.